years. But it's not as if each test is a replica of the year before, but with that grade level material. So it's not as if, you know, this is testing decimals. Let's see how the kids are doing for the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade decimal standards. It really is based upon what they're learning throughout the course of the year.
No, thank you. And again, that's why I appreciate the overview from both of you this evening to be able to explain all that. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Any other math questions?
So, Katie, can you just a couple of questions and along the same lines as we've been looking at it, as we look at this, you know, kind of what is the threshold from, you know, from red to yellow and yellow to green? You know, is that if I'm a parent and I'm seeing approaching expectations, you know, it feels like this could be a wide range of scores.
Yeah, and I would say it is a wide range of scores. So we used, for the meeting expectations, we used 80 to 100. For approaching, we used 41 to 79, and that does not meet 0 to 40.
Okay. And Kristen, can we just go back one step? One slide, or one more, sorry. So just looking at this math interim here, there's a lot of yellow. And I bring it up, I do have an 8th grader, so, you know, it is relevant to me, but I also know that, you know, this is such a foundational piece as kids go into high school. Are we at all concerned about the amount of yellow here and the range in there? Or is this, you know, is this consistent with, you know, we know kids are going to be a little bit behind after this, and our hope is that kids are less behind in Lynnfield than elsewhere in the country. I mean, this is not just a Lynnfield issue, but just thinking about the foundational piece going into high school. What should we be thinking about this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the 8th grade results this year look pretty similar to the 7th, 6th, 5th. So like I said, for this one, these tests were pretty different. And the other thing that sometimes happens in 8th grade is sometimes there will be some sort of review before the 8th grade interim at times, and they didn't do any sort of review before this one. So that could be one reason why there's a little bit more of a discrepancy between this. But I mean, I don't think that, you know, this 8th grade result is any, you know, reason to sound the alarm.
Okay.
If that makes you feel better.
Yeah, no, that makes me feel a lot better.
Sorry, can I ask one sort of follow up to that? So does that mean that kind of like, you know, there are a lot of approaching expectations? So does that mean there is going to be skills that need to be kind of checked in on and reinforced and maybe retaught or just taught when the kids get to 9th grade? Or is that planned for the next, you know, from now till the end of school?
I think there'll be some work from now until the end of the year, but in addition, the 9th grade Algebra 2 class does start out reviewing a lot of the Algebra 1 topics that need to be reviewed. And this actually happens regardless of the pandemic or not. So luckily we have, you know, a great high school team that works with us, and they do go back and they do revisit a lot of these 8th grade algebra topics. So if that makes you feel better, I feel as though that will definitely help the kids in the high school with the transition to high school, as well as making sure that the algebra is solid. So to answer your question, they do go back at the Algebra 2 and they start off doing a lot of these review topics that they need to.
Yeah, because it seems like the vertical alignment is very strong from elementary through middle school. And it was just, you know, if there are students who are going to be struggling more because it's transitioning from the 8th grade to the 9th grade anyway. It's just something to be aware of, I think, with that vertical alignment piece moving into the high school as well. That's
Absolutely.
Casey?
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. So I'm just wondering, the assessments are also used to identify students who may need some additional supports. I'm curious if, so from the beginning of the year till now, or until these assessments were completed, has there been any shift in kind of identifying, groups or, a certain number of students that then may require additional supports?
We do, after we give an interim, we do look at the results, and we do move kids into math tutorial or English tutorial if needed.
Okay.
So this is one piece of data that helps us with our forming of the tutorial groups. And similarly, kids who are performing well might not need that tutorial support anymore, and so they might come out of the group if we feel that that's necessary. This year we've been having our tutorials remotely, and so we really have been trying to give the kids, as many kids as we can, some extra support in the math. So it's been great that we do have these measurements that we can use, but we also use classroom data. This is not the only thing that determines a kid in tutorial. So we use the classroom data. We, the teacher who recommends a student to be in the support. We sometimes have parents who call up and say their child is floundering. Is there anything that you can do? And so this is just one piece of the puzzle.
Great, thank you for explaining that.
Tim?
Katie, is this will this be the second year at the high school where Algebra 2 will be given freshman year? Did we
Yes.
flip-flop that 2 years ago?
Yeah, this was the first year, I believe, if my memory is serving me correctly, the students are going to do Algebra 2 and then geometry the sophomore year. So
Okay.
It is a nice transition from the algebra into the Algebra 2.
Okay, that was my point. So they'll be able to revisit these topics and reinforce, getting back to Phil's point
absolutely.
of reinforcing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they would do that anyway when we had the geometry freshman year. When I worked with Mrs. Sambatakis, she really tried to make that geometry class have a lot of the algebra embedded into it. I mean, algebra is naturally embedded into geometry anyway, but she definitely worked hard for that. And then they have switched over to the Algebra 2, so there is a nice transition and the students get whatever sort of.
If I can jump in there, Tim, that was a big reason why we made that switch. Geometry class had been an integrated algebra and geometry class to help that transition. And the more we thought of it and the more we looked at that, we said it would just make way more sense to make that transition to the Algebra 2, because then not only are you reviewing the Algebra 1 concepts, but then you're instantly applying them and taking that natural step into the Algebra 2. So it wasn't quite a start and stop of algebra, geometry, then algebra. Even though it was all integrated, it just made more sense to go Algebra 1 to the Algebra 2. And there's a lot of overlap in what you're doing. And then you had a solid algebra background as you stepped in geometry as a sophomore. So we're excited to see how that works for us at the high school. But it's certainly, when you look at, I don't want to get into analyzing their data, but I think when you look at, the little bit bigger section of approaching expectations, those are kids that are still doing a great job and are getting there. And obviously it's not all going to be solved in 1 year, but as we take little bites out of that, as we move them along, it looks like it's certainly doable as far as we getting kids back up to speed. So we're excited about that.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you, Bob. I forgot there was a high school person on the call.
Any other questions from the committee? All right. Thank you very much, Katie.
Sure. All right, so we can now go on to Kate.
Kate, yep.
All right, great. So one of our biggest struggles this year has been finding that balance between assessing students in that really quick, meaningful way, so as not to take away from our limited class time that we have with the students. This year class time has been very precious. And sometimes when we've had the kids in person, we have all the COVID protocols like washing the desks or, sanitizing the desks, sanitizing hands, staggering, pastimes and all of that. So, looking at a 53-minute period and kids are only coming in, the 2 days a week, oftentimes, we haven't wanted to take all of our class time with assessing, but we wanted to get really quick, good data. So we felt very strongly this year that it was important to continue to give the grade, the group reading diagnostic assessment that we give every year, and they give in the elementary school. And I know Maureen Fennessy had presented the elementary data. So we wanted to be able to give that this year, but we waited to give it in January, February. Normally we use that as our beginning of the year diagnostic, but in our hybrid model, it would have taken 1 to 2 weeks to do that at the beginning of the year, and essentially the only in-person class time students would have had. Also, in the elementary school, we have 1 scanner. So we did wait, but we still, as Katie mentioned, our practice at the middle school is to give assessments. So there are things that, we've had in place for years that are, not related to the pandemic, but we've continued to give. We definitely had to really rely on quick formative assessments. We implemented a lot of new technology through Pear Deck, Nearpod, to give us that immediate lesson feedback to gauge where the students are who are home, as well as the in-person learners at the same time, instantaneously. So we also, in order to get quick lesson, we've given interns, we have our, our regular, homegrown tests that we've created for the end of the terms. We also wanted to pilot some standards-based digital assessments that were aligned to the Common Core that would give us a really quick snapshot at the beginning of the year to say, these are the standards kids really need to have reinforced. And we could use that data right out of the gate to help plan our instruction to fill in some of those gaps. So I'll go over that when we get to those specific slides. I selected grade level data to share with you from 4 different assessments, in addition to the grade, which I'll share at the end, to highlight just some of the things that we've done. Our teachers have been great, and I want to definitely just thank them for all their hard work this year and just really figuring out where the kids are at. As Katie mentioned, we've used a lot of department time to look at writing, and you won't see writing in any of this data, but we are definitely doing a ton of writing. We're very excited to have the students back on April 5th, because one of the struggles has been to not have the students in front of us and be able to have that one-on-one mini conference with the writing that we've so relied on with our instruction. So I do want to just make sure that I throw in that piece about the writing, that writing seems to be just a struggle in terms of teaching in that remote format. And we're definitely looking at PD options with our school improvement plan for keys to literacy content writing with Kevin. So we're definitely looking at the gaps in writing and assessing within our classrooms right now. So if we begin with this slide, this is our grade 5 winter interim. And this is an example of an interim we give every year. It's a homegrown one based on MCAS type questions that the kids read a passage, they answer comprehension questions, they have multiple parts. And if you look at our data from this winter, and we actually gave it around the same time we usually give it in December or January, our students performed very similarly in their overall results. And our standards for the does not meet, approaching, and meets are the same that Katie mentioned earlier. So you can see these look very similar. And if you advance to the next slide, I did an average of how they performed on the different standards of each question over the past few years. 2021, this year, is the purplish pink bar. And you can see that we're similar, if not a little higher, a little dip here and there. So the data is very consistent, and the teachers are able to get this information in a form, they discuss it immediately, they reteach, and then they move on. So we've had success with this assessment in the past, and I was pleased to see that our students are performing where they would have without having been in a pandemic. If you go on to grade 6 on the next slide, this is something Our teachers piloted a diagnostic test. It's a pre-test that was new this year through commonlit.org. Our teachers have used commonlit.org for years in terms of their instruction. Basically, it's an online digital platform. It connects to Google Classroom. The teachers can find differentiated passages that correlate with the unit themes that they're studying. And it gives students really robust comprehension questions that really get them thinking and understanding the material. And then the questions are very similar to those MCAS style questions. And it gives the teacher that immediate feedback of how the students are performing on the standards, so the teachers can give them more practice on the standards. So this pretest was actually pretty cool to see. And again, the pie slices look very similar. It seemed like on most of ours that does not meet stayed around the 10%, which is what it typically is. Again, this is a different test. We haven't used it before. But the great thing is that the 6th grade teachers got the data immediately. And if you advance to the next slide, you'll see how the students performed for the average of each of the different standards. So their dashboard that the teachers have shows each individual kid and where each individual kid needs their instruction and who's doing, who has, needs maybe enrichment in a standard, who might need more support in a standard. And then overall, you can see point of view was a lower standard for that grade as a whole. Again, that's not, something to be alarmed about, but it's something that they're using in their instruction to do a lot of lessons around point of view as they're, going throughout the year. So if you advance to the next one with grade 7, for this particular assessment, this was a little different, and I just highlighted this one to show. We've been using Freckle, which is an adaptive learning tool that we use in our elementary schools and middle school. And it basically, the kids can log on and they can do practice problems, and it's an ELA and math. And the teachers don't need to push out anything. The kids can just log on and they can have this extra practice. But this Freckle, which is owned by Renaissance, which we cited some data from the Renaissance STAR assessment at the beginning, they have a pretest that is all standards aligned. Again, very similar to those, reading comprehension passages to give the kids practice in the standards. And again, it was very strong. And, again, different tests. If you're looking at how did this group perform on the 5th grade interim, you can kind of go back and see, their results were very, they're consistent throughout the grade levels. And then grade 8, I highlighted one of the trimester tests, which is a common assessment our teachers in grade 8 use. I didn't compare it to other first trimester tests just because we shifted some units this year. At the beginning of the year, we kind of sat down as a department, as Katie mentioned, and we looked at, okay, what did we maybe not get to last year when we were shut down? What do we need to start? Then we looked at, okay, how many kids are fully remote? Who's in front of us? What makes the most sense to start with after all that, these kids have been going through social, emotionally. And so we shifted a little bit of our units around and what we were doing. So we used a different trimester test at the beginning, but it was a common assessment, and it gives our teachers that immediate feedback on the standards to go back and reteach and to identify students who might need extra support. And then so going on to the grade. The grade is our diagnostic evaluation tool, and this is a normative diagnostic assessment, and it does take several days to give. It's a paper-based test with fill in the bubbles. It includes sentence comprehension, vocabulary, passage comprehension, and listening. And at the time we actually administered this in January, February, we had over 200 students who were remote at the middle school. We had a snow day thrown in. So I want to give a huge thank you to our English teachers, our support staff, the parents, and our students for helping to make this test work, because At LMS, it truly took a whole community to do it. Christina and Maureen had to vacate their office at Summer Street so I could scan. It was a big process, but I'm not going to read you all the results because you can see through the pie charts. Again, it was so encouraging to see our data was very consistent, but I wanted to highlight this side on the screen right now to show you the growth scale value, because the beauty of this particular test, in contrast to the homegrown assessments that we have, is that this test is a test that measures growth over time. And so in the notes, you can see that the growth scale value is sort of that measurement, kind of like a ruler that shows where the kids are in terms of their growth. And so if you look in the table in the top right, you'll see it says grade level, average, GSV. GSV is the growth scale value, and then it says F/S. If you look underneath where it says grade 5, the 454 is the fall. So the F is the fall growth scale value, and the S would be the spring. So the 462 is the average spring growth scale value. So if you're looking at sort of that average of where you should expect student growth to be, that's the average. And our numbers are traditionally higher than that national average, which is great. But even during the pandemic, and we're looking at the spring norms for the 2020, 2021 column, those growth scale values are really, really strong. So our students have grown. And then I wanted to just highlight the color scheme of the chart, because if you follow on the diagonal, so if you look at the 2018 to 2019 grade 5 in gold, you see the 478 would have been that growth scale value or average growth scale value for our students in grade 5. When they went to grade 6 in 2019, 2020, follow the gold bar down, they were 490.2. And then this year, those students are in grade 7, so they'd be at 493.9. So you can see that class, if you follow the diagonal, that's color coded. So I just wanted to show you, this was very encouraging for us to see that the students are still growing in the midst of all that they've been going through. And I don't know, Campe, can you advance just to kind of show? I mean, if you're looking at the red slices, you can see, take the chunk, look at the red and the yellow compared to the blue versus blue and green combined. I mean, our kids are doing really well comparatively. And then advance to grade 6. And the right-hand side is listening comprehension, comparing it from all the 3 years. The left side is the total test, which includes the sentence comprehension, vocabulary, and passage comprehension. It's like an average of those subtests. Then grade 7, again, very comparable data. And we've seen kind of the growth to show it on how the class did compared to how they did the year before. This is just class to class. So again, these are different classes, as Katie mentioned earlier with math. The growth scale value is where you'd look at you'd be seeing the growth of the individual cohorts of students. So that brings us to the end of the English. Does anyone have questions about what I've presented for the English data?
I just wanted to kind of emphasize the fact that going back to, like, you don't need to go back all the way back, but those kind of key curriculum standards that the students are obviously, their levels of mastery, like identifying main ideas and details and backing up claims with evidence, those are very, very important skills, just generally to be able to communicate effectively, but they're also skills which are very much assessed on MCAS. So, like, moving forward, that looks like we're definitely in a good place regarding that. So it's more of an observation than anything else. And even though these basically it's different tests, right? but they're all tied in very much with the curriculum standards. So just being assessed in a different fashion. Does the Common Lit diagnostic, does that change in level? Does the student go in at a certain level and kind of go up and down like something like iReady, or is it just the same test for everybody?
So honestly, Phil, I'm still in the process of learning more about it. I know this was a pre-test. They do have, I believe, another tool that does do that. We, I'd be happy to look into it and get back to you with information.
That would be great. Thank you.
Rich or Stacy?
Stacy? Yeah, thank you. So, and I know, you mentioned that you didn't think it was alarming, but I did want to just go back to the average point of view, that score in particular. It stuck out because to me at least, it looked significantly low. So I just, I wanted to maybe try to revisit that and get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so point of view definitely tends to be a harder, just concept. I think looking at, sometimes it's more of an inferential thinking type question. We have nothing to compare it to, but I mean, traditionally we do have questions or standards that students do perform low like that on an assessment because it does have only 1 or 2 questions. And it definitely puts it on our radar. And that's why I'm not alarmed by it, because our teachers are definitely, like, it's on the radar. They're reteaching it and making sure that it's a standard that the students will have mastered. And also this is where it's a beginning of the year test. It's not expected that the students will have mastered it until the end of the year anyway. And so that's something that we're constantly reassessing throughout the year. So
great. That's very helpful for clarification purposes. Thank you.
And Stacey, generally point of view and inference and tone they're the most challenging types of questions that, students have the most trouble with traditionally on any type of standardized test.
Thank you.
Yep.
Tim or Rich?
Kate,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jamie.
Go ahead.
Kate, similar to what Katie had said, do you have areas of that you're going to tackle beginning on April 5th, areas that you need to reinforce and build up in preparation for the transition into the next school year?
Yes, definitely writing is one of those first and foremost. Yeah. And I feel like that's been the theme of a lot of our vertical articulation this year, is just the challenges of teaching the writing when you only have half of the students in front of you. Typically, especially in the younger grades, like 5th and 6th grade, the kids are so used to handwriting. Their graphic organizer is creating their own graphic organizers. They'll sit sometimes and handwrite that rough draft, and everything has transitioned onto the computer, and we're missing that face-to-face, which is so important. It's actually so exciting that we're going back and having those kids in front of us, because so much of writing instruction is that conference where the teacher is walking around the classroom and giving feedback on the writing as the student is writing it. So definitely that is a priority.
That writing will bleed into social studies as well, right? And a lot of writing there, so you'll be able to double down on the writing component.
Absolutely. And that's definitely been a push, pre-pandemic. We've been looking at writing across the curriculum areas with the content writing through Keys to Literacy. So, even though we've had to put a little pause on a lot of our training, it's something on our PD days. It's always been an option this year for teachers to go back and revisit some of the, some trainings that we've had. And then we did, we started a drive last summer with, little tricks and like a common drive with different graphic organizers and resources for teachers. But of course, with everything else going on, it's had to take a little bit of that back burner, because there's been so much more that has taken priority this year.
Yeah, we feel really good about where we're at there because of that work, that even though we paused it, that's such a big part of you'll see this later this spring, such a big part of our school improvement plans, as Kate and Katie mentioned. So And that's really a focal point across the district. That was not a, throw some professional development at teachers and walk away. That was a real investment in this district, and we're going to carry on with that. Like other things, it's unfortunate we had to hit the pause button, but we feel really good about where we're going to be with our approach to writing upon return, especially next school year.
Kevin, that was an area of focus 2 years ago, right? My recollection of district
2 years ago, and when you talk about writing across the content areas, I mean, that's what this whole approach is about, right? And we want students writing often and with consistency across the district. So in the elementary is part of those conversations too. The work they do, it's empowering writers, but it feeds into the work, and they've been continuing with that professional development this year, even in the pandemic, with pieces that we're doing too that Kate just mentioned. But just like anything else, it's not the way we wanted it to look this year, but that was a long-term goal, so we're coming back to it.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, Keys to Literacy is a very robust and effective writing program. So I think it's going to be a good thing to use to kind of get the kids back writing again, because it is the writing piece is challenging, remotely or hybrid, or it's something which certainly I would think at the middle school level, you've got to have that kind of that one-on-one conferencing and kind of circulating around.
Kate and Katie and even Kevin, can you just, we've got, obviously with everything going on, we've got more parents watching these meetings than they have in the past. Can you just kind of lay out what the process is going to look like from now through September 1st next year, as we start to look at where kids are, where the skill gaps are, how we're going to be adapting things over the next 6 months, and understanding what we need to do collectively as a school and as a district to continue to identify where the gaps are and fill them?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say this: we're speaking about academics, but you're going to hear next about social emotional learning, and that's where it starts. Teachers, you got to remember, haven't had that true opportunity to really make those meaningful connections with all kids, and that's going to be paramount over the coming weeks, and recognizing student achievement when we see it, and really, our students need to feel good about what they're doing, and there's a lot of good that has happened through the pandemic, and we talked about it today with the leadership team. It's really just being active listeners, and that's going to involve a lot of communication with our families, right, and with our teams. The level of collaboration that you're hearing tonight, at the department level, and as well as vertically as well. I mean, we're just gonna. It's honestly, that's what we do. I mean, it's about communication. It's about listening intently and making observations and coming back to the table. And as you're hearing tonight, we're being thoughtful about. It's not just about assessment, but we're being thoughtful about those assessments and having those meaningful conversations at the table. And then, we have when the time is right for those timely interventions. I mean, look at the special education staff, look at the tiered level of supports we have in this district. That's about, really just being deliberate in all those conversations and not letting our students fall through the cracks. So those conversations will continue, but it's not like it has to start with building those relationships back up. And we've got a number of kids that are going to have a heck of a time transitioning, and they need to feel good about where they're at, and families need to feel good about where they're at with their decisions. And that's been our priority from day one in this district. It continues to be our priority. And I'm confident. I've said it tonight. I mean, we've got such an exemplary group of teachers and administrators. And, we can't be setting off the alarm button. And I think you're going to hear that tonight as we continue on with this meeting. It's that's not to say we don't have students that are going to need some intense interventions, but I don't know if you want to add anything there, but it's certainly being thoughtful and timely with those interventions, and I know you don't want to hear the word continue, but there's a lot of good happening in this district, and there's going to be more opportunity in a different way, right? Now that the kids are in front of us, and teachers in the same room, you know, to really have those meaningful conversations and connections with our kids.
Tim, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question for both Kevin and Kristen. As you guys begin to dust off all the plans that we had in place, you know, last March, pre-pandemic, what do you guys envision as being, you know, a top priority? Is it really going back to all those plans that we had in place to bring the district along and revisiting those and trying to reconcile what you got done this year, and then enhancing those, then putting them in place for next August, September? I mean, is it really just going back to the business as usual with all the great ideas you had before we had to hit the pause button for the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, you know, the curriculum approach is just so differentiated at the different levels. I mean, I could get into the nitty gritty of what that's going to look like next year, and that'll happen later this spring, but it looks so different at each level. You know, obviously a key component of that work is going to be that assessment component, probably more so than in years past, right? In really being thoughtful about the measurement. But you know, that curriculum development is going to continue, and there's going to be a real effort. When you look at integration, like equity is, I'm telling you, you're going to hear equity over and over again, because this now is the time where we're really starting to, we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes in terms of, this is what I spoke to you about earlier, all of our students feeling comfortable in this district and all of our families, and that's where it starts. And that equity work that we're going to be doing is going to intersect the curriculum, the social emotional learning that had the foundation that's been built in this district. You know, there is absolutely, I can't say, how do we have professional development next year and not have a component of social emotional learning, you know? And I don't want to pretend we're not going to have kids that need, and teachers that need more trauma support, you know, in terms of really just, you know, any approach that we can, any wraparound approach that we can provide for our families. We're continuing to build up our resources in this district. You look with the work we're doing with the Healthy Lynnfield. You look at the decisions that have been made with hiring these adjustment counselors. And so, you know, they all need to get involved in this work too, right? Let's not forget, we've got 2 brand new, you know, adjustment counselors on board, and thank God we did. So yeah, there's the SEL component, there's the equity component, there's the curriculum component, but it's going to continue to be differentiated and across the different levels. And I can tell you, I mean, we're always busy, but yeah, that's going to be more than enough if we do it the right way, you know, we're thoughtful about it. Yeah, we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but it's exciting work. We don't want to be talking about COVID and COVID protocols. We want to be talking about, you know, improving teaching and learning across the district. That's what I know that's what I missed, and that's what we're going to come back to. So yeah, it's a continuation of a lot of the work that we were doing, but it is a different lens, I guess, and a different, you know, in response, in a timely lens to the work, and that's where, you know, you're gonna see a lot of work happening from an equity standpoint in terms of what that needs to look like.
So I'll just add quickly to Kevin's comments. So when we started in September, we were very deliberate about looking at not necessarily going backwards, but moving forward. And you know, I think that when we look at the data that Kate and Katie have presented, and when we looked at the data from Christina and Maureen, we can see that with the approach that we took, which is to continue to move forward, not to go backwards and reteach, right? But to continue to move forward is why we're seeing in the data that our students are making academic growth, right? So when I always think about data, when we look at data, that this great data that Kate and Katie presented us, and same thing with Maureen and Christina, that we look at it for 2 things. We look at it to use the data to inform instruction, right, which they spoke to, which is we look at that data and the teachers make decisions in the moment, sometimes over time, depending on the assessment they're looking at, and they make adjustments. So it might be reteaching, right? It might be spiraling backwards. It might be moving forward, right? It might be enriching. So the other piece too is that data is to look at academic growth. And notice I didn't say academic deficits, right? It's to look at academic growth. And that's important, right? So when you look at this data, you can see that we are seeing growth. And we're firm believers that we, particularly this year, right, we are looking at strengths. This should be a strengths-based approach as opposed to a deficit-based approach, right? So as our students come back in the next 2 weeks, right, and as Kate said, we are all so excited to see them, right, and to have them for 5 days. So imagine that we are to grow up, build on the strengths that our students have already built and what they already have on that foundation, and how much further we can take them in a short 12 weeks, right? So we are going to continue starting on April 5th with providing challenging content, right? We're not going to go backwards. We're not going to say, you know, they didn't get this or they didn't get that or they didn't get this, right? We are going to continue to push out challenging content for our students. And then we will support students so that they are able to meet and achieve and find success with that challenging content. So that's really the pathway that we will be seeing as we move to with April 5th with all the kids coming back.
Great. And I'll just wrap that up by saying two things. You know, for those who have not watched a lot of these meetings, I mean, this is the approach that you're seeing here is it's data driven. We take a data driven approach. We look at the numbers. There is quantitative data that we're looking at now. We're going to hear about qualitative data in a little bit when we talk to adjustment counselors. But the data informs the decision-making process as we move forward. So, you know, Kristen talked a lot about that. Kevin talked a lot about that. Kate and Katie talk a lot about that. Maureen and Christina. The other thing that I think is important is I want to look at this. This is, I would say, most of what we've seen tonight is it's directionally good news. I mean, I think we all believe, and you know, Kristen just talked about the fact that we're not talking about deficits, we're talking about progress, and we are seeing progress here. And I think we're not so naive as to say that you know, we in a more normal year we would probably see more progress academically. But you know, that's where we are. The other thing that I think is important about this, and for those of you who have not watched meetings in the past, you know, I've been watching these presentations for 7 or 8 years now. I don't know when we've done them in the course of the year, but you know, Kate and Katie have come to us and they've had bad news in the past, and they've shared it, and they've been very direct, and they've talked about what needs to change and what we need to do to get better. So I appreciate the honesty. I appreciate the fact that this is, you know, again, directionally positive, and I would say relative to what we're seeing across the country, much more positive than other districts are seeing. So thank you for all you guys are doing. Thank you for the hard work that you've put in this year, and we'll continue to put in as we come out of this pandemic and into the next normal. Any other questions? Oh, Stacy?
No, I was just going to say thank you as well.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's move on to the next piece on the agenda is we have our adjustment counselors here. So Kristen, do you want to tee this up?
Yes, I'm going to pass the baton over to Roberta Keene, who will introduce our 4 school adjustment counselors for their presentation this evening.
Hi. I just wanted to preface this presentation by saying that in addition to the direct work our adjustment counselors have been doing with students this year, which this year has been more critical than any other time, they have done a really excellent job of being a great resource to our families, providing resources to them both directly and indirectly through their website. And in preparation for our students returning to school, which it's going to be an adjustment. Students who have been in the hybrid model or some who are returning from remote, it's going to require a certain amount of adjustment. So I'm really appreciative that our counselors have put together this presentation for our families. Tonight we have with us Kristen D., who is our adjustment counselor at Lynnfield High School, Marissa Botta, who is our adjustment counselor at Lynnfield Middle School. We have Gabriella Brennett, who is our adjustment counselor at Huckleberry Hill. And we have Heather Hunt, who is our adjustment counselor at Summer Street School. So I'm going to turn it over to those ladies. And thank you, ladies, for all the work you did put into this presentation.
Does one of you need to be a co-host to drive?
Hey,
Marissa?
I volunteered as tribute, so I'll hopefully be able to do this.
All right, I'm making you a co-host, Marissa. You should be all set.
All right, wish me luck. Here it is. Okay, Gabriella, you're up.
All right, well, thank you, Roberta, for introducing us. So Marissa, if you want to just jump to the next slide, that would be wonderful. And so thank you again for inviting us to present this evening. We're excited to be here. This slide that you'll see in front of you is just a breakdown as to what we're going to be speaking about tonight. So we're going to start by sharing what families and teachers and just anyone that may be working with the individual students might see in terms of changes in behavior, some challenges with coming back to school in full in person. And we've broken this down by age level. So we have elementary students and then middle and high school students. And then from there, we're going to focus more on what are some strategies or tools and ideas that families can use at home. And also, again, what can teachers be doing in the classrooms to help students support them during this transition. And we're going to look at this more generally for all students, and then based again, broken down to the elementary level and the middle and high school levels as well. And then towards the end of our presentation this evening, we've also included a slide with our contact information, our names, and our adjustment counselor websites that Roberta had referred to. And families can actually find all of our websites by going to each of the individual Lynnfield Public Schools websites. Each school, there's a tab that says families, and if they just go to the drop down there, they'll find our websites there. And this presentation will be linked to our websites after tonight's meeting, so families can feel free to look for it there. So I'm going to pass it on to Heather.
All right. Hi, everyone. Marissa. Oh, perfect. Thank you. So I just want to highlight our and start with our youngest learners. So students at this age often find it difficult to verbalize what they're feeling anxious about. So it may manifest through physical symptoms such as headaches, stomach aches, and difficulty sleeping, which is completely normal considering this big transition that's coming up. So for some students, it's been over a year since they've been inside the building in the classroom setting, and others, they're going to be back in the school in the classroom with double the amount of kids that they were in the first half of the year. So this is going to be a big adjustment. They may have difficulty paying attention. They also may feel like they're not getting enough attention and feel like they need more attention because there are going to be more students in the classroom. So there's also the chance for some work avoidance. They may avoid because they feel it's too hard or they feel like it's overwhelming and experience feelings of anxiety or worry. And they also haven't been asked to do this in a while. So they might shut down, they might avoid, they might, come up with the somatic complaints to avoid. So it's helpful to keep encouraging to move forward. So along with the work avoidance, there's also the school refusal and resistance. We've seen this already with some kids kind of
it's been over a year since they've been asked to come into the school full time, or if at all. So they may be feeling anxious. They may avoid. This is a big transition. So we just need to be prepared for that. There may also be behavioral outbursts. So there are heightened behaviors such as like defiance, aggression, destroying things, throwing things, because they're not able to verbalize how they're feeling. So they may act out. There's also going to be decreased stamina. I know that Superintendent Vogel mentioned this last meeting. So our goal is to increase the student stamina for the new work environment. So they may be asked to do things they weren't asked to do in the past year over remote learning time. So they're going to be in person 5 days a week, and they're going to be exhausted, and especially at the end of the week. And that's okay, because they have to build their stamina again. I know we saw this especially last week with the first graders coming back. They were tired at the end of the week, and that's okay. You know, this is their second week, and they're going to start getting used to it again. And then the last thing we just have listed is the emotional dysregulation. So the younger students, they often don't know how to verbalize their feelings. So they may cry or appear withdrawn when asked what's wrong. So many students are going to say they don't know because they can't express what they're actually feeling. So it's important to help our children label their feelings to build that emotional vocabulary to have that conversation. So I'm going to pass it on to Kristen.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk about what you might see with your middle and high schoolers. So like Heather had mentioned, we can kind of expect some somatic complaints. You know, your children might complain of headaches, stomach aches. There's a strong, connection between our mind and our bodies. And so, some kids might not even realize that they're anxious, but they're feeling it physically. So it's just good for us to know that. Resistance to coming to school. You might see some crying, some oppositional behavior. Some kids might absolutely refuse, say that they're not going to be coming. I think that can be surprising to us because we're so excited for them to come back. And I think parents are really excited for them to come back 5 days. And, we all know that it'd be good for them. But there's still, there's going to be some apprehension about that for many kids. And it can be overwhelming to think about going back in for 5 days. It's just going to feel, really strange for some of them who haven't been in school in over a year. The next is texting and emailing parents to go home, wanting to be rescued, really feeling like they can't make it through the day. At both the middle school and high school, we've seen an increase in this year. And, we can expect that going 5 days a week, that parents are going to be getting some more of these texts and emails. Social anxiety. Some kids haven't seen a lot of their classmates in over a year. So it might be a little bit uncomfortable at first. Also they're used to a really small classroom, and they're going to have to get used to having a lot of kids in their class. And that might feel uncomfortable to them at first. You might see some moodiness, more moodiness for their age. They might become more withdrawn or more isolated. Some of your kids are going to be very exhausted. I think we can all expect that. And, as Heather put, they're just going to have to build that stamina the first few weeks. And we expect that. We know that we're going to be seeing that. Also some difficulty with their sleeping. And then substance use. Some kids start using substances during times of stress or increase their use. So it's just important to be aware of that. And then the next slide. Okay. So what you can do. So it's just, this is, something for parents and caregivers, just in general for all of the ages. And then we'll break it down into age groups, as Gabriella had talked about. So as a district, we really embrace the philosophy and work of Lynn Lyons. She's an anxiety specialist who has written books and has a regular podcast for parents with children who struggle with anxiety. Many of the strategies we're going to be talking about tonight are consistent with her work, and we will be sharing her resources with you at the end of the presentation. I think something that Superintendent Vogel had talked about was just kind of moving forward. And I think that that's part of the social emotional piece, is that it's not always going to feel comfortable to them, but we really need for them to move forward and know that it's going to be okay, even if they're uncomfortable with that. So the first one we talk about is just being consistent. In your homes, there are certain expectations that you have for your children, and it's important to keep those in place. We want to validate how our children are feeling, but at the same time, keep that consistency of what is acceptable versus kind of unacceptable behaviors in your home. The next is allowing time for your child to adapt to the school expectations and demands. just being patient. I think we'll all have to be a bit patient with them and understand that this is a big change and a big adjustment. The next one is normalizing their feelings, letting them know that they can expect some anxiety, some uncomfortable feelings, and that's completely fine. It's expected that they're going to be anxious, and that's okay. And then Gabriella is going to take us through the rest of this slide.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, so this next bullet point here with predictability and routine, I think this has been extremely difficult this year just because there's been so much change. So we really feel like, the more that we can start putting in routines now, the better it's going to be for the students while they're transitioning back. So thinking about things that can be simple and consistent, so that families can do, that caregivers and teachers can do, will be extremely important. But we also know that sometimes our plans or routine we might be having could change. So also modeling and encouraging that flexibility, even using language around, all right, our plan is not working out as we thought it would, but that's all right, we're going to be flexible, especially with the younger learners. That's going to be really helpful just to promote that flexibility and that language. And then like Kristen mentioned, this is another transition, and a lot of our students have sort of adapted. We know children adapt relatively easily. And so they've adapted to this hybrid model where they weren't coming to school every day. And so now to come back to full in person, it's another transition. So just to be prepared for some resistance, some pushback about coming to school, and possibly some big emotions like Heather and Marissa talked about. You can go ahead, Marissa, thanks. So this is now going to break it down. So this is for our youngest learners, but our elementary learners. So again, going back to some routines. So this would be a really great time. Obviously, we've already had our K through second grade beginning this week back at school. But, if you can establish some routines at home, we know that these routines may look different, and every family, may choose to do routines differently. But really getting back into like the swing of, okay, we're going back to school full time. What are some routines you can start to put into place? So just examples, for bedtime, if you're a family that, wants the technology put away a certain amount of time before bed, starting to do that now can be extremely helpful. And then there's many others as well that may work better for your family, but having some simple routines and also trying to have your child be a part of that routine, because that will also teach them a sense of ownership and independence, which are two really big things that all learners need to have, skills that learners need to have, and especially in our young learners. And then moving on, so validating feelings, like Kristen said, we know there's going to be some uncomfortable feelings that students are having while they return to school, but we really want to, hope that parents and families can really make sure their child is coming to school every day, because that's going to help with this transition a lot. What we do know is that when we allow for avoidance, we're actually, we're pretty much reinforcing that anxiety or that worry, rather than teaching, children that they can learn to manage and tolerate these uncomfortable feelings. And that's what we're here for. As a school, we're here to help them when they're having those uncomfortable feelings. So just getting them to the building every day is going to make a huge difference here. And then our next point here, so positive reinforcement. I think even Kevin touched on this before, but children, they want to do well, they want to please. So we use this phrase, catch them being good. So when, we want them to feel proud of themselves. And I think that's something, as we transition back to full in person, children are going to need to feel that motivation factor to do well and to feel motivated to do their work and avoid the, work refusal and work avoidance. So there's many different ways to positively reinforce, but just as some examples that we've shared with families is thinking about, at home, how can you have some type of reward system for them where they're earning marbles or stickers or pom-poms when you catch them being good. And, we sometimes talk about rewards. We try to stay away from things that cost money, but more so about how can you, do something as a family, pick out the movie for that weekend or pick out the dinner for a night. And that sometimes is motivating in itself for children. And then the next one here is be a role model, which I think families are already doing, but we know that children, they're like sponges and they'll absorb everything around them. So the more you can model how you work through some of those uncomfortable feelings and, show them what kind of tools and strategies you use, they can pick up on that, and that will be helpful for them as well. This next strategy here is one, and I know Kristen referenced Lynn Lyons, but a lot about talking back to our worries. So instead of letting those worries kind of take over, how can you acknowledge and validate those worries and, acknowledge the worry and validate that you're feeling worried, but saying, you know what, I'm feeling scared right now, and I've had this feeling before, and this is my worry talking, and I know I can handle it. And I think it's good to point out too that, you know, if this is a worry that your child's had before, whether it was coming to school pre-pandemic or just worried about something else, going back to thinking about when is the time that they felt worried and when did they have a success? You know, when were they able to overcome it? Because that's also helpful for children to hear. And then the last one on here, this is something that sometimes schools will use in classrooms or outside of the classroom, but is also something we're suggesting to parents to think about, is like a calm down space. So just a space in your home that's a safe space designated for your child to go to when they're having some of these big emotions and may just need a break and need some time to regulate their emotions. So different tools work for different children, but some examples could be some kind of mindfulness, calming jar, you know, that they can shake up and kind of watch settle, and that can be calming in itself. There's different kind of breathing exercises. Sometimes just drawing on paper is helpful, listening to some soothing music. Sometimes we need more movement, so some yoga moves or some kind of, you know, movement cards that they can follow along to. But the idea is that we want to help them regulate their emotions, and this could be a great opportunity to positively reinforce them when they do a great job using this space and calming themselves down, you know, acknowledging that and letting them know how proud you are of them.
All right, guess I am up. So a lot of what Gabriella said will also work at the middle school level. I mean, that, you know, especially these middle schoolers, middle and high school, they need to get their sleep schedule back together. And, you know, they'll even say, I'm staying up too late. I know I am, but I can sleep in a little bit more because I stay home on Thursday, Friday. So I have an extra half hour of sleep. And I'm like, no, like we have a couple of weeks to get it together here. So start it now, get yourself like in your room, get yourself like technology away. So establishing those routines again is going to be important. One of the things to highlight here was, you know, Gabriella just talked about like a calm down space. Adolescents aren't really going to want something called a calm down space, but I talk about preemptively practicing skills. So we want to teach kids how to use skills the same way that we teach them their math facts. So, you know, 2 times 2 is 4. You want to start teaching kids how to use any type of skill. And the more you have them practice it, not necessarily in an anxious moment, the better off they're going to be, and the more that they'll actually go to it when they are sort of in that heightened space. When we are anxious, so like I have my own, you know, notes here, our IQ, you know, drops a little bit and it's harder to recall information. So I have my own notes in front of me to sort of help remind me where I kind of want to go. So similarly, you know, that's important for kids. Validating their feelings, we've talked about this a lot, but ensure that they're coming to school. I get a lot of parents that it's very unlike them. They usually love school, or that, you know, they're just not feeling up for it today. I think I'm going to keep them home. And I'm like, no. Like, if you can get them in the building, I promise you, we will figure this out. And so that the more that we're able to do that, I've had kids on, and the other, you know, school psychs have had kids on plans where we get them in for an hour, or we get them in at least for like a certain block of the day. Just, you know, I say to parents, I don't care if it's 11 o'clock, get them there. The more we get them there, the better off they're going to be. Give them a space to be unhappy and grumpy. It's going to happen. Transitions are really, really hard. We know that. One thing I try to practice myself as well, our reactions can either like heighten a situation or they can help de-escalate it. So when their emotions get big, we can't help, but our emotions also get big. Something I have tried to use even in my own life and at school, I have a 3-year-old niece that, you know, can drive me a little crazy, and she often will yell. Her reaction to things right now, I mean, I feel bad for her. She has a counselor that's an aunt. I mean, an aunt that's a counselor. And I like start whispering. So I want her to match what I'm doing. I almost come down like really too low because I want her to match what I'm doing. If I just started yelling back, I mean, it would be a yelling match with a 3-year-old, and, you know, nobody's rationalizing with a 3-year-old. And so, another part of that is not allowing kids to dwell on the negativity. I find that kids are often now saying, I'm just bored, or school is boring, and there's nothing good ever going on. And I'm like, there had to have been something good in your day today. Like, let's get there. Absolutely validate, work them through what's happening, but really try to focus on the positive in any way that you can. Because the more of what we foster will grow. The more of what we talk about will grow. If we kind of give them too much of a forum to talk about how awful school looks now because of all the different changes, then that's what's going to grow. And we don't want that part to grow. If they, monitor for any substance use. I know Kristen touched upon that. We do have a partnership with the Healthy Lynnfield, which they have amazing resources and some other people that are there that have a wealth of knowledge about different kind of program that's happening. So you can always reach out to us and we can kind of give you that information if you don't know how to contact a Healthy Lynnfield, but they have a great website as well. If the students are struggling, make sure they know who they can go to in our buildings. Reminder bridges, I'm going to go on to that in the next slide. Gabriella talked about that a little bit with the younger ones, kind of reminding them of their successes. I think that was the biggest pieces I wanted to cover there. And I was sort of ending here with a visual. I'm very much a visual person. Lynn Lyons has 2 books. One is for parents, one is for students. Myself and the school psychologists actually ran a group last year with some students where we read the Playing with Anxiety, Casey's Guide for Teens and Kids. That's where this is from. So a reminder bridge is really, and parents are going to be like the #1 people to be able to help with this, where it's, do you remember when you really wanted to go to that summer camp last year? And it reminds me how like you started sleeping over at somebody's house and that was really hard for you. So now you remember, oh my gosh, I was really uncomfortable then. But there was a success there. So you're sort of really giving a bridge to a successful moment that they've had before. Like I said, parents are going to have a wealth of knowledge of different times that their kids have overcome things. And so reminding them that they're able to sort of power through, push through, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's been my biggest thing I've said to all my students this year. We're all a little uncomfortable, but we're going to be okay. We're going to push through it. And like I said, once they're in our buildings, we'll get them to where they need to be, but getting there is more than half the battle. And I know that some families have really had a lot of difficulty getting kids to school because it's hard to see kids so uncomfortable, especially when that hasn't been, their personality, that hasn't been who they are. But this is a different stomping ground. And so, we're here to support them. And like I said, once you guys get them there, we'll take it on, but that's kind of for now.
So here is our contact information. As Gabriella had mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, this is linked on each of our websites. So if you go to your school homepage, go to families, you can, the drop-down menu will come up and it will show our school adjustment counselor pages there. So you can find our presentation and a lot of other resources on our website and our contact information if you have any other further questions. And then on the next slide, these are just Lynn Lyons resources that we had mentioned before. So Marissa just talked about the Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents, which is a great resource that we have recommended to parents. And then the Playing with Anxiety book is what Marissa was talking about with running an anxiety group for students. And then the podcast in the middle here is a Lynn Lyons podcast. She addresses a lot of different mental health related topics. Each week she comes out with a new one. She actually recently came out with one about students in transitioning back to school, which was a great listen and is also linked here. So you can give it a look.
So before we open it up to questions, I just wanted to thank all of you for putting together those wonderful websites. And we did send them out probably 6 weeks ago. And you know, we will include your presentation in what we're going to send out tomorrow to our parents in our s'more. And I have also included Lynn Lyon's most recent podcast, which all of you had been retweeting on Twitter this weekend, that I also listened to as well. It's her most recent one from last week around returning to school, and it really is excellent. So I have included that specific one in the s'more to go out tomorrow as well. So I think it's important for our parents to remember, and just to sort of summarize a little bit of what these wonderful women were just talking about, which is that, you know, our children respond to our behaviors, right? And how we talk, what we say, and how we act. So if we are nervous and fearful and anxious about the return to school, our children will be as well. So, you know, you talked about them as sponges. They are sponges, and they will pick that up no matter what their age is, whether they are in kindergarten or whether they are a freshman in high school. So they will respond to how we talk, what we say, how we talk with our friends, how we talk with our partners and spouses about this big transition, this big event, and they will respond in a way that is reflective of that. The other important piece is to think about one thing that I think parents could do as we make this transition is at night is to ask their children about what's one really good thing that happened today. And this was a practice that I used with my own children every single night. And sometimes I got silence and sometimes I got some good stories, but it changes their mindset and how they think about their experiences and what happens in the day, and shapes it into, let's look at the positive as opposed to dwelling on the negative. And I think it's also important not to interview for pain, right? That oftentimes as parents, we are can quickly get sucked into interviewing for pain. So what happened today? Was it good? What happened, right? Did you get that back? Or did someone talk to you, or did anyone sit with you at lunch, right? So you don't necessarily think of that you're interviewing for pain, but you really are, and you're dwelling upon all the negative, what can be perceived by the child as being in negative experiences, and trying to flip that and really emphasizing the good things that happen in the day, because there are really good things that happen every day for every child in school. So it's important that we get at that. And just remember that our kids are resilient and they are adaptive, and all of us who have been every day working with our kids have seen amazing things that our kids have been able to do, and skills that they have learned in the last 12 months. And we need to celebrate that and applaud them for doing what they have done, which is pretty remarkable in the last 12 months.
Thank you very much. Just one piece of context, again, considering that a lot of people are watching this for the first time, just some historical context of these of our adjustment counselors. We started talking about this in 2016. It was introduced, the concept of social emotional learning really started to take off. It was the first time we talked about the need for adjustment counselors. We started talking about it in the budget. Superintendent Tremblay requested it, and it took, I think FY19 was the first year we got one at the high school, and then FY20 middle school, and then this year we were fortunate enough, and thank goodness we had it, because we were able to add them to the elementary schools, and it's going to be so important to the reentry. So I think it's important to recognize that this has been talked about for 5 years, and we're very fortunate that the town has supported us when it comes to these requests, because it's going to be crucial getting our kids back. I have a couple questions. I don't know if the rest of the committee, I will open it up to the committee first. Phil?
I just wanted to check in with Melissa and Karen. So I remember we talked a couple of years back as part of the conversation about the fact that you were both spending about 50% of your time dealing with social, emotional issues with students. And I know this has been an exceptional year and very different from any other year. But how do you see the adjustment counselors kind of, I guess, fitting in and helping you do your jobs as principals better?
They've been critical. With Heather, we're talking daily. You know, when there's a student who is resistant to coming to school, Heather's right out front so that I'm meeting the student and I'm supporting her, but I can also do morning announcements and greet the other students and get my other part of my job done. So we're collaborative partners, but she's roaming the halls and taking kids out and meeting with children and having lunch bunches and then inviting me into lunch bunches. This year would have been so much harder without all of her efforts every single day for students.
I would just echo the same thing. Gabrielle and I meet almost daily and have important conversations about our students. I know both adjustment councils have also done an amazing job just building community and making sure that all of the students and the teachers feel like we have a safe and welcoming place for everyone. So we're really grateful for the work they've done. And it has allowed us to do more of what we should be doing every day, but continue to work together to help our students.
Great, thank you.
Tim?
This is just more of a comment, and I know Krista may have not done this intentionally, but for those of us that are old enough to remember two-a-days, which was, you know, a week of torture for practices, looking at the calendar, these children really just have to push 14 days and then they get a nice week-long break. You know, so to the parents that are watching, you know, there's a carrot at the end of the stick here. You just have to push them for the 10 school days, and then they get to the end. And then when we come back after break, it's a nice push to finish up the school year real strong. So it's really a challenge for the next, well, 10 days beginning April 5th to get them in the building, get them used to it, get them acclimated to it. And then when they come back, it's just going to be like they're going back to what they knew before. So it's just the timing is good having that break in there. So it should be interesting to see how the kids transition.
Stacy or Rich? Rich.
Sure, thank you. I've been waiting for this presentation for a month, and I cannot thank you enough for everything that we know you are doing and have been doing this last year. There is not a member on this committee that couldn't tell you they've heard from a parent that is having a difficulty maybe with their child at every click of the measuring stick, from the lowest of the lows to you know, barely being able to participate in school during the situation in this last year, right up through those, you know, that we know are having success on a daily basis in whether full remote or hybrid model that they are in. And I wanted to also thank Dr. Dwyer and Principal Weiland for continually sharing the monthly newsletters that go out to the elementary parents. This one was particularly engaging when it came to social emotional items on it, and I had the time since it came out to listen to the Lynn Lyons podcasts that are listed in there. And if the one regarding the can parents prevent anxiety disorders is not included in the superintendent's SMORE that may go out tomorrow, if we could, if it's not too late, if we could maybe add that one as well as the current one that came out over the weekend, which was also phenomenal. Parents may remember that a couple of years ago we had the good fortune to have Lynn Lyons here, but reading those newsletters, you know, having now 2 years out of having a child, you know, of my 3 children that went through the elementary schools here, it's really good to read those newsletters, and I appreciate every conversation that we have with the elementary level principals at this time. The other point I wanted to make, if I could, we are still in, the COVID pandemic, and, it's great to look at the screen and see Tony Rebello's face. But I do wonder if we, as these symptoms may arise in children that come back to school, if we can successfully separate out the symptoms that they claim from anxiety versus a COVID symptom. And I hope we have success with that. I personally know stories of parents whose, children have expressed symptoms that may be related to COVID, but are actual anxiety symptoms, and have been put in touch with, each of you at the different levels. And I just hope we can, prevent some over COVID testing, if you will, based on anxiety that may be presenting itself, and a conversation with one of you adjustment counselors versus the treatment through the nurse processes may be more helpful. So thank you. And again, thank you for everything you do.
I think that we, thank you. I think that we do spend a lot of time with our nurses in our buildings because it is so closely tied, and it's hard to know. But we all work really closely with the nurses in our buildings and try to figure that out, because that is almost a daily issue. So really trying to figure out if it's a physical thing or if it's more emotional. So we're working on it.
I think, Kristen, just to piggyback off of that, Rich, I think it's a great point you're making, and I agree as well. I've been working closely with our school nurse, and, obviously if they're sick, we don't want them in the building. We want them to be feeling better. And so, we do have to send them home, but we definitely know, students that are constantly asking to go to the nurse. The teachers are doing a really great job kind of keeping track of that, and the nurse knows as well. And so then that's when we know it's an appropriate time for me to come down once we've ruled out that this child is not sick, and they may just be showing more of those somatic, signs, and just, could be worried. And I've been able to kind of step in. And I think we've all been able to do that. So we are, aware of that as well.
This was stuff that was going on even, prior to the pandemic, where I used to have plans for kids that would go down to the nurse. And so the nurse and I'd be like, all right, so this is like Johnny's plan. So anytime Johnny comes down to the nurse, I know it's really not a stomach ache or whatever it is. And so Johnny would have a clipboard that he would have to go to. And it's like, what is going on with me right now? Or what other strategy can, so it's we've been working hand in hand, I think, with the nurse for quite some time, but it's definitely increased now. And differentiating between, COVID symptom versus non-COVID symptom has definitely been harder, but it's something that we've been continuing to kind of monitor. And, Diana Gerbic has been great at the middle school. She's always contacting myself, or, the school psychologists are right kind of next to her. So that's kind of perfect with how we are, that she can easily sort of grab somebody and be like, hey, can you guys check in with, Johnny over here? I think there's something going on. He might be a little nervous about something. So we definitely are working with them.
And if I could just follow up, the one other point, the excellent point that you made is the parent modeling that needs to happen over the next couple of weeks. And if parents have the time and they can listen to those Lynn Lyons podcasts or the other resources that are going to be provided, that we've obviously had the benefit of reading already, it really provides them some information to give them some, what's the right word, some preventative skills, I guess, to maybe meet some of these challenges. Because we all certainly know parents that want their children back in school as much and more than they have seen the last year, but we have to meet the need of that child that shows up at the door. And I have full confidence in the ability of every person in each of these buildings to handle that when they arrive. So again, thank you.
Stacy.
Thank you. So similar to what Rich said, obviously I've been eager to hear this presentation, and it's lovely to see your faces, and the presentation was wonderful. Some great suggestions. The other piece too was that I had the opportunity, as Rich mentioned, to look through the Summer Street School and the Huckleberry, the newsletters, and in particular, Gabriella and Heather's, there's so much information out there. It's just extensive and it's so helpful. I would just encourage parents to go through those websites, look at what's coming out in the SMORE tomorrow. All of these resources are just, even if it's just one helpful tool that a parent or family can glean from it, it'll be wonderful. So I thank you all for the presentation and for the information on your websites. And another thing too, and I think, it's just a different way of saying it. I think we're all saying a lot of the similar things, but I think back a couple weeks to something that one of the beloved middle school teachers said at the PTO meeting. And I think we all just need to allow each other and ourselves some grace and some patience. This is going to be a big transition. So we just need to be patient with the students, with our kids, with the teachers, with ourselves, and just, there may be some blips in the road. It's just kind of been that kind of year. But we'll, like everyone said tonight, we will get past those, we'll get through it. So just conveying that positive attitude and reaching out to these resources that we thankfully have. So I thank you all for being here tonight.
Yeah, can I just echo, I think we basically want to move forward with, like you were talking, Kristen, as well, that assets-based mindset. Everything moving forward is assets-based, whether it's to do with academics, whether it's to do with social emotional, and particularly with the equity piece. It's like all of these things are assets that can meet the whole child is actually going to learn. So I think, moving forward as a district, we've got to really maintain, it's nothing new, but, continue with that asset-based mindset and not be worried about the deficit piece because, like you said, Kristen, kids are resilient. They'll get caught up. We will move forward. Things will be better, right?
Thanks,
One
Bill.
other thing, sorry, I was just gonna say one other thing I forgot to mention that, maybe I should have highlighted on the slide as well, is making sure that parents are taking care of themselves too. I mean, I know that we're also focused on the kids and we're absolutely focused on the teachers and, how we're all doing. But one thing that parents tend to sort of forget to take care of themselves. So in conversations with parents, I'll often say, so thank you for letting me know about, what's happening. So, like, how are you being supported? So similarly to, the airlines that are always saying, put your own oxygen mask on first, and then you can help somebody else, making sure that, you as parents, guardians are taking care of yourselves because you're taking on a lot and you're going to be taking on a lot more in the coming weeks. So that's also something I recommend is making sure that you're making time for you. And if you can't read, some of these great things that are out there, there's no time. There's never any time. The podcasts, I think, are awesome, that it's something quick and easy to kind of listen to. At the end of the night, it's really hard to kind of sit and read anything. We've all been there. So I think the podcast that Lynn Lyons have will be great resources.
Thanks, Marissa. I have two questions around addressing parents, and maybe they're just parenting questions. First, to Stacy's point about the fact that this is going to be a big transition, and to Kristen's comment about our tendency to interview for pain when kids come home. I think everyone's really excited about the fact that we're going back. We're going back on April 5th. There's some anxiety about that, but the reality is, especially for the group that's going back on April 5th, 3rd through 12th grade, it's going to be different than normal. And what normal school looks like. Kindergarten, first and second grade, they don't really have a sense of what normal school is because we've been in this so long, but 3rd through 12th do. Should parents be talking about this? And if so, how should we be talking about it to prepare them for some of the differences that they're going to experience?
I think it's really good to talk about it with your kids. I mean, especially, I think like you had said, 3rd and up, I think you can have certain conversations with them. I think it's okay just to acknowledge that this is not necessarily what we're used to, but that this is also good for us. And even though it might not feel good right in that moment, maybe it feels uncomfortable, but but we know as your parents that this is good for you. And so this is what we need to be doing. And it might not feel as fun or, as comfortable as it once did, but there will be some good things, and to find the silver linings. I think that, another thing, just talking about like what's a positive thing that happened in your day is just kind of, practicing gratitude with your kids. What was a small thing? What were a couple of things that happened? Have them kind of pointing out some specific things that did go well, because there's a lot that happens during a school day. I also think that, kids really keep it together all day, and then they come home to you and they're going to be way more comfortable with you, and they're going to let it all out. And as a parent, I can tell you that that's really hard. It's really hard to hear that your kid might not have had a good day. But as Kristen talked about, there were a lot of good things that happened, and we see it sometimes, even though parents don't. So I think it's okay to talk about it, and then just highlight the positive. And we're going to get through it. That hope piece too.
Right prior to this, I was Googling, because I know, even when I ask students now, how was school or how was your class? Or I get nothing. If I get like, nothing, or it was fine. That's very, a teenage, it was fine. Everything was fine. So I was Googling different ways to ask questions of, how to reframe. So I found an article, it was like 25 ways to ask your kids, how was school today? So instead of just how was school today, you ask more like specific questions. When were you happiest today? How did you help somebody today? Tell me something that made you laugh today. Instead of that sort of vague, open-ended, like how was school today? Because more often than not, we're not going to get much out of them. And I know we always learn that the hard way, but I thought that was a really cool resource that they have out there, that it's just, maybe I can throw something together and put it on our website as well, which is like just questions, other kinds of questions to ask, other kinds of like scripts to ask.
That's great. And then the other question I have, and this is an age-old question, it's not unique to COVID, but how do we address the stigma of needing help? The stigma for parents, the social, the judgments that people feel like there is out there, the social pressures for a teenager feeling like they need help but are embarrassed to ask for help. Because there are going to be more kids now that need help than ever before. So how do we address that?
I think more and more celebrities, I think that teenagers actually really respond to that. I know my teenagers at home do, and I have noticed this in the high school, is kind of pointing out to them, there's a lot of different resources out there where celebrities and people that they know are talking about their mental health, and it really makes a difference. Athletes, I'll talk to, teenage boys about their famous athletes that they know, that they might not realize, wow, that person is struggling with anxiety. So I think the more we can just normalize it, and I think for kids, sometimes it is those famous people, that YouTube channel person, that person in your favorite show talking about it. And it really makes them realize, like, wow, this is just a normal thing. I think it is hard, when I was in elementary school counselor, you were like a celebrity walking down the hallway. Oh, can I go and see you? I want to meet with you. And then, maybe a little bit in middle school. By high school, it's like, oh my gosh, please do not make eye contact with me. And that's fine. It's just one of those things where if we can, try to make it feel more comfortable and realize that it's just talking to somebody. It really is. And that we all struggle. I think that, the more we can normalize it and talk about it, the better.
Just to add on to that as well, I think I was going to say, Kristen, the normalizing I think is going to be super important. I know when I speak with some parents, I share with them just that like they're not the only ones with a child that's facing some of these very similar behaviors. And I think that in itself just kind of gives them that like, oh, okay, I'm not alone in this. I also think, the more parents feel comfortable talking to each other, like, what are you seeing at home? And, you don't have to get too in detail with it. It's up to you, what you want to share with each other, but just making each other feel supported, and that, maybe there's some similarities going on between different children and families. And that in itself can also help parents feel better and feel like they have their own little support groups as well. But yeah, we're here to support and we want to help. So we encourage, for families to reach out if they are, having any difficulties or could use some resources. We have many to give. So, like Kristen said, I hope that we can just continue to normalize it.
That's great. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the committee or comments from the principals? Well, thank you guys for all you're doing. Thank you for all you will be doing over the next few months and into next year. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Let's continue. So next on the agenda is we have the conversation, the METCO presentation and conversation, and for those of you who are new to this and you know hadn't been watching last week's our last meeting. This meeting was actually supposed to be in Roxbury at METCO Inc. And to be there and work with some of our Boston families, and obviously the pandemic has pushed all of this remote. But you know, Curtis has done some great work this year, keeping our students who travel from Boston engaged and part of the community that they've grown up academically in. So, Curtis, I'll hand it to you.
Yeah, I mean, our students are in a great place right now. Out of our 34 students we have, 33 are back in school either full time or do hybrid. So we've been moving our students slowly back into school, but we're pretty much there. Our kindergartners are they're all just really excited to be back in school. So I think our families have been really happy with the support that they've gotten through this year. You know, we had 7 of our kids enrolled in extended learning over at the community center, and that was really helpful, particularly for our younger kids to have that experience, you know, to be around their friends and just have that social interaction. I think it's so key to their learning, you know, at our younger ages. So that's been great. We have 2 seniors graduating this year. Both have post-secondary options. One of our seniors is right now deciding whether she'd like to either go to University, Penn State or Providence. So she's got some really good college options. So we're a really great place where our kids are just excited to be back in school. Our families are happy. Our seniors, our 2 seniors have some really great options, as they transition out later on.
That's great. And one of the things we have to think about is what we're gonna do for next year. And we are gonna have to vote on that so that we can start looking at applications for next year.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on this, Curtis?
Yeah, I mean, so we historically taken kindergartners. I know Chris and I had talked about widening that pool to maybe look at first graders at some point. Certainly, kindergartners would still be our priority and our preference. But if there was an opportunity to take a first grader who could transition as well into the district, that's something we'd like to keep as an option also.
Any questions from the committee?
I guess.
Rich?
Oh, sorry.
Nope, sorry, Phil. Didn't see you there, my friend. Curtis, if I could just ask,
Yeah.
how are the kids doing?
So far, they're doing well.
I don't mean that. I'm sorry. I don't mean that in a certain way, but I want to make sure that they know and are experiencing everything that we have here in Lynnfield as if they truly lived here in Lynnfield. Because as we look at them and think of them, they are Lynnfield students, and I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure they have that sense of community and feeling.
Yeah, I would say at least just in my conversations with the families, I think they feel very much connected to the community, and very thankful for the opportunities that have been made available to do. Being a part of the Lynnfield learning community, particularly for our younger kids, having that opportunity to go to extended learning at the community center, that was huge. It really helped them to be in town with their friends and not feel like school was a world apart through just being remote. So I think that was one. Our kids, at the high school, continue to be engaged in extracurricular activities. A lot of several of my students at the high school actually stay out in Lynnfield on the weekends and hang out with their friends and go to practice. So I think our students feel very connected. Our families are happy that their children feel very connected. Particularly our families, our parents are happy and appreciative that when they needed something, they didn't have to ask too many times. It's whatever the kids needed, whatever our family needed, we responded fast to those needs.
Thank you.
Bill?
I basically piggybacking off what Rich said, pretty much similar thing. Are there any other supports and resources that we can kind of offer that would be helpful?
I think the support and resources we have to date are adequate. So, that as things come up, I'll reassess, with Ms. Vogel. But I think right now, I think we are well placed to provide our students with the supports they need.
That's great. Stacy.
Thank you. So Curtis, you mentioned that, many of the students are involved in extracurriculars. I'm just curious, of the 33, and this year is not obviously a typical year, but out of that 33, how many of them are, and obviously that would mainly be kind of the middle school or high school age students,
so
right?
when I say I mean the extracurricular activities are really applicable to our high school students. So all of our boys are engaged in sports. I have one of my students actually working with Healthy Lynnfield. So she stays out here in twice a month and does some of the after school activities with that program. So I think we have a good cohort right now. Certainly moving forward, we'd like to find ways to expand that and get even more of the students involved. But what's been great is that the students have gotten involved in their own initiative. And I just try to support them the best way I can, so that they can continue to do that uninterrupted.
Great, thank you.
Curtis, just in general, is Metco seeing an increase in applications with? I know BPS has been mostly remote for the whole year. Is that leading to more folks coming towards Metco?
So that I can't say for certain because I don't know what the numbers are. I would say that at least over the last couple years, kindergarten has become a bit more competitive as there's a large demand and there are students. And certainly, I think part of that is families having more options through charter schools. Families decide to keep their kids in district, and I certainly think that with just the environment of the last year, families opting to keep their kids home until they find out, get a better sense of what school would look like moving forward. So certainly I don't know how COVID has impacted our numbers to date and moving forward, but I do know at least over the last couple of years, the younger grades have become a bit more competitive in terms of finding students who are a good fit for Lynnfield.
Got it. Well, for the committee, I think we've talked about the desire to expand our Metco program over time. I think, given where we are, I think my hope is that for the 22-23 school year, we can really start to think about it. The new classrooms will be done. You know, there will be more space to accommodate that. And I think we have a good foundation in place to be able to get there. And it's nice to, you know, a lot of this is due to the work that you've done, Curtis, to put us in a position where we can even start to talk about expanding this program, because I think it is so important. But I think, and I think along those lines, we continue with 4 students next year, hopefully 2, and then you know, look to expand by a few in 22, 23. But you know, that's my thoughts. I don't, you know, I'd love to hear from the rest of the committee. Phil?
Yeah, I'd agree with you 100%, Jamie. This is a great opportunity to expand the METCO program as the schools get bigger. So, and I think that's something we need to do.
Stacey, were you going to say something?
No, I agree wholeheartedly as well.
Yeah, I guess my only comment, Jamie, would be as long as the foundation continues to stay strong, which Curtis has built up over the years substantially, I think we could look at, you know, changing that policy and maybe being a little bit more aggressive at the younger grade levels. It's a formula that certainly worked at the kindergarten level, but we were hesitant to expand it because the foundation just wasn't there to support those students. But I think Kurt has put that foundation in place.
That's great. Rich?
And if I could, I mean, we've gone through this 3-4 year process to get the school classrooms expanded to a point where we're going to need them for all the kids that are here in Lynnfield. And I certainly would have no judgment against adding a METCO student should we have the space and the ability to meet the needs of all the kids here in Lynnfield and some additional kids from the METCO program. And Curtis, kudos to you for everything that you have brought this program to where it is today. Congratulations and thank you.
Great. If there's no more discussion on it, I will actually make a motion. So move to approve four students for the METCO program for the 21-22 school year.
Second.
Tim?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So Curtis, you can start planning and
all right,
keep moving forward.
I'll get on it first thing.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, great. Everyone have a good night. Thank you.
You too. Take care. All right. We have to, next up, we have the LPS calendar for 21-22. We had looked at this. We had looked at this at the last meeting. I don't know if anyone has any comments or questions before we vote on it. So just going back, for those who are watching, the first day of school for students would be September 1st. We have 5 snow days built in. The last day of school would be, I'm trying to find it right here, would be the 23rd. And the addition, the one change to the calendar this year would be June 19th. Juneteenth would be, we would be closed if school goes that far. And we will post this as soon as it's approved. Stacy?
Yeah, sorry, not to correct you, but and I'm not sure if I'm looking at the right thing. It looks like the last day of school would be the 24th.
Okay.
Okay, no, I just, yeah.
You would, if that's what, if that's what it says.
Just-
I'm doing that more by memory than anything else.
Okay, I just had it pulled up, so.
The Juneteenth holiday, the 19th falls on a Sunday, so the Juneteenth would be Monday, the 20th.
Monday, the 20th.
Correct. Mhm.
And then just to reiterate, the last day of school for this year is the 21st of June.
21st, correct.
Yeah, and we will vote on that at the next meeting. We've been kind of superstitious about March snowstorms.
Mhm.
Can I get a motion on the calendar?
Move to approve the Lynnfield Public Schools calendar for the 2021-2022 school year.
Second.
Thank you. Rich?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So we will get that. It'll be stamped as approved by the school committee, and it should be up on the website in the next couple of days. All right. Superintendent's report.
All right. So we wanted to start the superintendent's report with just going over highlights for the return to school on April 5th. And I'd like to start by thanking all of the building principals who are here this evening, along with the rest of the ALT for all of their amazing work over the last month to get ready for this, this big event. Over the past 3 weeks, we have brought in our kindergartners, our first and our second graders into school 5 days a week, full in person. And that has been a tremendous undertaking by all of the teachers and by Melissa and Karen to make that happen, and really want to thank them for all of it. The level of collaboration and the attention to detail has been absolutely amazing. So parents should understand that this process is, there's a lot that is involved in this, right? As we know from our K1 and 2, but also gearing up to bring back the rest of the entire district 3 through 12 on April 5th. There were desks that had to be ordered. There were lunch schedules that had to be rearranged. There were classrooms that had to be rearranged. There were remote teachers that had to be hired. There were remote special ed teachers that had to be hired. There were a number of many moving parts that had to be figured out before we could safely bring everybody back on April 5th. And we are moving ahead. We are moving forward. We are making tremendous progress, and we will be ready on April 5th to greet our students with open arms when they all come in on the 5th. So just a few other details to go over with parents, and just similar to what we did a couple weeks ago. All of this will be followed up in a s'more with specifics for parents tomorrow. So if for some reason people are not able to watch this evening, it will all be in a s'more tomorrow. And then there will be a follow-up by building principals later in the week or the beginning of next week as well, with many of these same details. But I think most importantly that we want parents to know is that, you know, there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of details. But the one thing that we intentionally did as a leadership team back in the summer when we looked at what we wanted our hybrid to look like, that was very intentional, so that we were thinking about when it was. Of course, we didn't know when it would be, but when we would transition back to full in person, we chose a model that would make that transition to be as smooth or as seamless as we could make it. Now, it's not perfect, right? However, we designed it in a way that we're able to make that transition in a way that is best for our teachers and best for our students. So when your kids come back, and we want to reiterate this, is when they come back on April 5th, it will look very similar to what it's looked like for the last 10 months, right? In a hybrid, it will just be that they will be in 5 days a week as opposed to coming in 2.5 days a week, right? Their schedules will, for the most part, will be the same, right? They will, at the middle and high school, they'll follow schedules, right? They'll be in there when they're in school. In the elementaries, they're with their same teachers, right? When they're in school, they will have specials as they have had on the other days they have been in, right? They will have lunch, which we have been doing for the last 10 months. They will still follow the different directional arrows that are in the hallways, whether they're one-way hallways, right? Upstairs, going up one way and up and down another, right? They will still follow all of those same protocols, wiping desks and washing hands and hand sanitizing, right? All of that is still in place. And these are all wonderful habits that our students have been learning in the last 10 months, and all of that will continue. So the real big change is that there will be more students, right? That is really the real most significant change that our students will see when they come back to school. So going back to our presentation on SEL, right, by our school adjustment counselors, and when you are talking to your children about making this transition, right, it really is going to look very similar to what they have been experiencing in the hybrid, if they have been coming to school in our hybrid. It's that they will be with all of their friends now, as opposed to having half of their friends on Zoom, right? They will all be together. So that's a really important thing that we want parents to keep in mind. Another important piece is, certainly that with more students being in, there is the real potential of having more close contacts. So that if we have a positive in our school community, right, the number of close contacts will now be doubled, right? Because the close contact definition is still 6 feet, right? The CDC has changed their guidance around spacing in a classroom, but they have not changed their guidance on close contacts. Now that might change as we move through the spring. We don't know. There is some discussion about that, but that has not changed to this date. So parents need to understand that the close contacts will increase, right? And this is also will be the situation with our buses, right? We have we have great ridership right now on our buses, and it's wonderful, and it's made a huge difference in terms of arrival and dismissal, especially at our elementary schools and our middle school. However, there will be more close contacts, right? Because we have more children riding our buses. So that's just something we want to make sure that our parents are aware of, right? These are the trade-offs, right, that occur when we move to full in person, and we think it's an important trade-off, right? Because having our kids in school is an important place for them to be, and the best place for them. But parents need to understand that we are still in a pandemic, right? And people are still getting sick, and people are still being hospitalized, right? And we need to be conscious of that. And we need to know that we still have to follow all of our mitigation strategies. So whether it's quarantining, right, identifying our close contacts, keeping our children home when they are symptomatic, we need to still continue to do all of that. And we also need to be really cognizant about avoiding large gatherings, right? I know that it's very tempting right now with nice weather, longer days, wanting to have cookouts and get together with friends in large groups. But puts our schools at a tremendous risk, right? That the virus is still around and it is still spreading. And we do know that large gatherings where people are unmasked for longer periods of time and not socially distancing is where we're having significant spread. And we don't have to look very far, right? We can just look at two towns over where I'm sitting right now in Swampscott, Massachusetts, right? Where they have had a high school party where there are now 37 confirmed cases in their high school. They have a high school the same size as ours in Lynnfield. That is a large number of positive cases. They have over 100 close contacts, right? That came from one high school party, right? Their high school is closed now for 2 weeks in full remote. All their sports have been put on hold for an extended period of time, right? So it's hugely important that as a community that we're begging you, right? That if we want to keep our kids coming to school and engaging in sports and doing all the fun things and having field days and moving on ceremonies and graduations, right? That we need to keep gathering we can't have them happen, right? Because we're going to end up with a community spread in Lynnfield, and that puts all of this at risk, right? And we just don't want to be in that position to have to do that, right? So we are pleading with you to please be diligent, continue to do it, right? We are almost to the finish line, right? Many more people are being vaccinated, and that will continue in the next 2 months, right? But we're asking you to please follow all of these strategies, socially distance, wear your mask, and please stay away from gathering in groups. Particularly our middle and high school students. I know it's very tempting, and I know it's what you want to do, and you haven't been able to do it for a long time. And we very much understand that, right? But we're really asking you to really adhere so that we can have all that we want to have for the end of the year. In terms of couple other things just to highlight. I just want to reiterate the vacation policy, right? That particularly with April vacation coming up, that if a family takes a vacation outside of our school vacation, right, that we do not encourage that. And the teachers are under no obligation to provide any work to families. And that means that they will not be able to Zoom in to any, whether it's a remote classroom at the elementary level or to their regular classes. If they're in grades 7 through 12, they will not be allowed to do that if it's outside of the school vacation. So I just want to make sure that families are aware of that, because that is a little bit different than what has been a little bit of our practice earlier in the year. So we just wanted to make sure that parents are aware of that. Tony, did you want to speak to allergies, like symptomatic students a little bit for everyone?
Yeah. So just, as Kristen was saying, something that, that myself and obviously the school nurses, what we want to stress is just everyone just to continue what they've been doing since the beginning of the year, right? Following the attestation that we sent out at the beginning of the year, checking our kids for symptoms before they come to school. And just, being mindful of, even if yourself, if anyone in the household has symptoms that could be COVID related, to keep the students home. The thought behind that is that now that we're bringing, again, all of our kids back into the building together, they're going to be at 3 feet, they're going to be in school for 5 days. What we might think is, a headache because of an allergy or a runny nose because our kids have allergies, it could be COVID. Those are the same symptoms that we are seeing here in Lynnfield. When our kids become COVID positive, they have just a headache, or it starts out that way, or it starts out with just a runny nose. And then now that kid has the potential to be in school for, it could be 3 days that they are infectious in the school building. And what that does is, it could create 10 close contacts or more, depending on what if you're at the high school, middle school, when the kids are traveling and they're with different kids in different classes, what could be maybe 1 day of, keeping your kid home because they have a runny nose and being just extra cautious and getting them tested, it could save 10 plus other families from being in close contacts or from COVID spreading in the schools. So, it's just something that we just want to, be mindful of and work together just to be extra vigilant, in those areas. And we know that particularly with allergies, it's very difficult. It's tough. The symptoms are exactly the same. So where in the fall, we're like, okay, we can take a blanket kind of doctor's note saying my kid has allergies. So don't send them home if they have a runny nose or a headache. What we have seen since the fall is that, again, those are the symptoms that we're seeing in our COVID positive kids. So our confidence level that it's allergy related, we can't be confident with that. And we just feel that it's extremely necessary to take this conservative approach, given the volume of students that we're going to have in the buildings now and the disruption of what a quarantine does, right, to a family, on top of the potential health risk of it spreading, right? So we're not going to be able to take those blanket doctor's notes that say, my kid has allergies. So what we're asking is, if your kid does suffer from allergies, my children do as well. I've already started them on their allergy medications, right, to help mitigate those symptoms, and just, just do the best we can to be mindful of even other people in the house that have symptoms of something going on, because we know that spread is huge in the households. So likely if maybe dad has a runny nose or starting with a sore throat and he thinks it's allergies too. So he's like, oh, I'm just gonna get tested just in case. And I send my kids on to school that day. Well, you could potentially have those kids be positive, and we're now, dealing with a situation where but we have multiple close contacts and we don't want to be in that, when it could have been avoided, right? So, families have done an amazing job with this throughout the year. We just want to put it to the forefront of everybody's mind again, just with the volume of kids that we have coming back in.
Tony, can you explain for families the change in the travel order to a travel advisory?
Yeah, sure. So that's the other thing we just changed yesterday. The state went from a travel order to a travel advisory. So meaning that it's now not required that individuals test or quarantine when they come back into Massachusetts. So falling in line with that state guidance, we will also no longer require, testing or quarantine to be done. It's advised, it's recommended. The state would, appreciate that it's done. We would the same, but like the state, it will no longer be a requirement for us.
Thank you. And all of the updated, just a reminder to parents, all of the important COVID protocols are on a one-pager that is on our dashboard, and something that Tony updates on a regular basis every time there is an update to guidance. That document gets updated, and we will also include a link to that document in the SMORE tomorrow as well, just as a reminder for our families. Okay, just a quick, one more quick thing, and then if our building principals want to just speak generally to their specific buildings in terms of reopening, just generally around Chromebooks for our students. The general statement is the child's going to keep their Chromebook until the end of the school year, and then we will have a process for collecting the Chromebooks for inventory and updating. Many teachers will still be having their students use their Chromebooks, as that has been a very important part of their learning this year, and that will still continue to be the case. There are specific grade levels at one of the elementaries where they will be turning them in, and they will be staying at school, and they won't be going back and forth. But for everybody else, the Chromebooks will continue to come back and forth to school as needed. So we will collect them at the end of the year. All right. Bob, do you want to start us off and talk just a little bit about the high school and reopening?
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you, Kristen. Obviously, like everyone else, we're excited to have students back in the building. The great majority of our day isn't going to change much, just like you reiterated earlier. There are directional arrows in our hallways, hand sanitizing, desk cleaning, that's all still going to go on. The biggest thing for us is lunch. Obviously, with the number of students we have in the building, we'll be using multiple spots, part of the auditorium. We'll still continue to use the cafeteria. We've got a number of tables outside. We'll also be using the gym, the bleachers in the gym as a place if people want to go. We've already seen obviously with the nicer weather, a lot more kids going outside. Given the number of students that are now going to be in the building, we're going to have to start limiting the number of students that are sitting at each table, just to help us with our contact tracing. There's just no way to put 100 tables outside in order to sit everybody out there. But I think, again, our students already do it where they might go out and sit on the curb or find other spots outside. There's some benches. We'll put a bunch of chairs out there. The big point that we need students to recognize, they just need to space out appropriately out there. And again, especially with our outside tables, they're a little bit smaller. So to be able to put 4 or 5 kids at that table now moving forward when we have everybody in, just makes contact tracing a little more difficult. But again, if it's a nice day, there's plenty of space out there that kids can spread out and go wherever they'd like to out in the front of the building. We have some other spots outside that they can get to. But again, obviously, when the weather turns not so nice, we will have space in the bleachers during lunch that students will be able to space out nicely. There'll be markings in there that they can go to, again, auditorium and our usual spacing in the cafeteria with 2 students per table is kind of what we've looked at. So other than that, it's all go the same as it has been. So we're looking forward to that. Again, we've said, our high school students can be a little more independent. So whether it's, if they are out of the building, being able to get an assignment through Google Classroom, those students that may be on quarantine, being able to Zoom in, And again, being able to adjust that differently in different days and kind of be able to roll with the punches a little bit more, but just what our students have been doing all along. They've been doing a dynamite job with that, both students and staff. And we're looking forward to having everybody back in. So. Rich, you have a question? Sorry, Jamie, I didn't mean to take over your role there.
Go for it.
Bob, Bob, that's the difference between you at the high school and say Mr. Ralston at the middle school, where you have assigned, we've had assigned seating up to date at lunch. So it's a lot easier. At the middle school, it's specifically easy to contact trace because we know that kid is in that seat, in that space every day. So it makes it a little different at the high school.
Yeah,
so,
at the high school, it's been like that all year long, is that, we've been utilizing cameras and again, speaking to students about who did you sit with and trying to get some more information from there. We've also bringing more and more students in. We've now added some more QR codes and numbered tables that might help us, we hope. But again, a big portion of that is where we're going to be relying on students to be honest with who they're with and kind of recognize that. It's given that the difference for us in normally our lunch schedule changes every day, but now the way we've been doing lunch by grade, although some kids might sit with someone different day to day, that typically the same group of students usually is sitting at a table or sitting with each other somewhere along the line. So we're hopeful that contact tracing will be a little bit easier to take care of there.
Sure. And just one other thing I wanted to mention, I was able to see the graduation protocols came out from DESE yesterday. So that seemed positive, that maybe, something can happen for graduation. I don't even want to use the word something will happen for graduation. And I know you will work hard to.
Yeah, sure. I think, obviously I thought last year the drive up worked well, but now given some of the other protocols that have come into play, our plan last year was to try to do family pods on the field. I think we're super hopeful at the very least that's going to be what we can do. I think it's still kind of difficult to try to be just throwing people into the stands and having them kind of go wherever, trying to make sure that we've got it pretty structured. The DESE talked about a number of different things as far as capacity. But I think, again, just to make sure everybody stays safe, we're going to try to keep them fairly controlled. But I think, a big portion of that may be having students sit with a family pod, a family cluster on the field. And that gives everybody an opportunity. And we're, depending on the size of that cluster, is really going to be the big thing to try to be able to get, a few more. We're normally, like when we go indoors, we may get 2 tickets or 3 tickets. We might be able to give groups of 4 or 5 people with a student, and then hopefully that will happen. And again, we'll see that may change as we move forward too. If DESE uses additional information there, that could be helpful. But I think in general, we've got a number of different protocols, different ideas as we look at all of our senior activities and what we can try to do. And how we can get kids a great celebration at the end of the year and give families an opportunity to witness some of that. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, so just, thank you as you always do, just positively looking at anything we can do this year for those seniors.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Tim.
Bob, in light of what happened in Swampscott, will you be sitting down, or will you and Brian be meeting with each class to kind of go over everything and just remind them to be vigilant and, so they have a successful end of the year?
Yeah, our plan is to do some class meetings starting actually this week with our students that are in. So we'll grab each cohort where we'll have an opportunity to kind of meet with them a little more together in person with the smaller groups. Then obviously with some of the things that we've talked about, we'll send out emails to the classes and kind of continually remind them of what those protocols are and what we need to do and continue to work with that. It's the same thing that's been going on all along. We've had students that have been positive that have come into the building, and we've done contact tracing, and everybody's been awesome about, working with us, working with Tony and working with Mary Holman and teachers and students and families that to work to do the best we can, whether it's in a classroom, whether it's on our athletic teams, that we've been able to address those things. And again, we've, luckily, we've been able to mitigate that and make sure that it hasn't really spread and gotten to the point where, we're going to have to do a shutdown or anything anyway for that. But I think, again, we're back to those protocols are in place for a reason. If we need to do that, I think the idea there obviously is we're not shutting down for the rest of the year. We shut down to give a quarantine period and then get students tested if we need to, or find out the contact tracing, and then we get back to business. And we're able to, I think Kristen said it earlier, our hybrid plan is flexible enough that if we need to bounce back in and out, we hope we don't have to, but we're confident now that we've got some strategies and some protocols in place that we can make this work. Steve, go ahead.
Thank you. So I think it was the last meeting when Ava O'Brien mentioned that, some of the high school students were interested in, possibly bringing back more music and drama. And I wasn't sure, I think Kristen, you had said maybe DESE was coming out with some additional guidance on that. I don't know if we know anything further on that, or if there's any potential, to.
The drama, our musical is planned to go ahead and perform in May. I know Doug and Harry have been working with band and chorus to see if we might be able to put together an end of year concert somewhere along the line, however we might be able to do that. But certainly with some of the things that DESE has come up with, there's certainly some opportunities for students to perform. Some of the biggest problems we run into is we're not truly a venue, the way some places are, but so putting students in our auditorium to perform with an audience, it's impossible to do that without having masks on. And that certainly impedes some of those performances, but we're still going to try to do that and make sure everybody stays safe. And we're working. I spoke with Chief Davis last week about some of this as we're trying to make sure that we're following those protocols and being able to interpret some of those guidelines and some of the capacities to the best of our abilities to whether it's an indoor facility like our gym or our auditorium, or whether it's an outdoor facility like our stadium. So,
thank you so much, Bob.
Certainly. Steve, over to you.
Okay, we're doing such a good job, Bob. I figured I'd let you keep going.
Watch your back, Jamie.
So just to kind of echo what Kristen and Bob had said, as we're welcoming all of our students back on the 5th of April, most of our students have been in school throughout the year. Maybe some had gone remote for several months and they're returning. We've actually, in the past week or so, we've had quite a few students who started out the year remote and are starting to trickle in. And, they committed to come back April 5th. And, in our conversations, well, can we come back a little earlier than that? Absolutely. And it's been really, I think, beneficial for some of those students to almost have that soft entry where they're coming in with half the students and, getting used to some of the routines that maybe they weren't part of since they hadn't been in throughout the year. But really, and all the things that we've had in place, it's, those are going to continue just with more students on a daily basis. I think right now at our count is out of 700 students, I believe 23 are going to remain remote through the end of the year, which is just around 3%. Something else that, I'm very proud of with our plan and, the fact that we've maintained our schedule throughout the year. The students have had their full program. Yes, it's looked differently, but, just yesterday, we started trimester 3 and the students are, as they cycle through day 1, day 2, day 3, they're getting, either art or music or media or STEM or, whatever the next course is in their rotation. So, I've been very, happy that we've been able to maintain that. Our arrival procedure is going to, I think, be a little trickier just with the increase in traffic on Main Street. I did send out an email last week to that effect, and some, maybe some things that, parents might do around looking at transportation. Maybe having your child walk if you live close enough, bus ridership and so forth. But I'm expecting for those first several days for traffic in the morning to be certainly heavier than it has been, and hopefully that will settle out. And we're going to be working with the Lynnfield Police Department on that. I will be, as Kristen referenced, I'll be sending out an email later this week, beginning of next week, with some of the details specific to the middle school. And a lot of these are really just reminders of things from back in September when we got started. Everything else is really kind of staying in place with what we have as our daily routines. As weather improves, we'll start having lunch outside. I was actually hoping to get out there this week. Even though the temperature is nice, it's still awfully muddy out there where we would be using that space. So, we're really excited about having all of our students back, and it's going to be certainly an adjustment for, the coming together of those two cohorts, because, when you're in person in class, you're focusing on the teacher. You're not even looking at your computer screen so much. And when you're at home as a remote learner, you're focused on maybe the screen sharing or the teacher, and not necessarily, the classmates. So now all of a sudden you're going to have 20 plus classmates in the same room at the same time. And, again, it's been about a year and a week since we've last experienced that, both on the teacher and the student side. One thing I'd also like to mention, specific to the middle school, but this really kind of in line with Kristen's comments about being safe in the community. We happen to have tennis courts and a basketball court on the middle school property, and both of which are utilized quite a bit in the afternoons, evenings, weekends. And those are now reopened. The nets are back up, and I just really want to reiterate to the community, because it's not always just middle school students. It may be high school age students. It may be students, college age students who live in town but maybe go to a different high school, that are utilizing those courts, that they're wearing masks and using the space in a safe, appropriate manner. It's not something that we can police during the school day when those courts really belong to the school, but after school hours, it's really not something that we can enforce. So we might be looking to see if we can get some signage up there about masks being required when using those spaces. But that's just one thing I would like to mention. I'll entertain any questions people might have.
I was comment more than anything else. I was fortunate enough to Kristen and Stephen took me around the middle school the other day, and I was really, really impressed with the level of the minutia of the moving parts and how detailed absolutely everything was, and all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed, which I think you absolutely need with like younger than high school students. And from the kind of like the in the gym where they have their little numbered spots, which also correspond to a numbered spot in the cafeteria for lunch, and basically how when one bunch of children are going upstairs and another one's heading down to the lunchroom, it's just an amazing thing to behold, the amount of planning that has gone into all of this. And this is obviously at all the levels, but I just want to commend everybody on that. And I was just like seeing how thoughtful and diligent people have been about kind of working out the process of how this is going to be effective and how it's going to work. So thank you for that.
Rich?
Sure. So, Mr. Ralston, if I could, as we approach April 5th, and we're going to treat that almost as a first day of school for kids, I just want to make sure and I'm sure you've had these conversations with the role that you have, but just want to make sure that all the fire drill and safety drill protocols will come back in force.
I actually spoke to the fire department today because we're going to be practicing with the masses, and we will be doing a fire drill probably right after April vacation. Let our kids get settled, let the teachers practice, with the larger groups of students. But I've already talked to the fire department today, and we will be doing some drills, in late April.
Thank you. I had no doubt that you were right on top of that. Just wanted to make sure parents also had that appreciation.
So should I jump in, Jamie?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Karen and I wanted to start this evening just by saying how well the transition has gone and how proud we are of our kindergarten, first graders, and second graders. And that's really due in part to the great work that the teachers did in preparing for this and the resilience of our students. So I know tonight we needed to spend important time to talk about the challenges of students returning, but I also want to remind families that are watching that this is such an exciting time, and that for the younger students, it's gone better than I even anticipated. And what I've seen more is that students that were having anxiety with a hybrid model, who had a really hard time transitioning back after being out, they're really excelling right now, and they're doing even better. So I do believe we will have students with anxiety, but I also think that for the majority of our students who have spent time in the buildings, they're going to do really, really well with this. And for those students who struggle, we have a great plan in place. Just like the other principal said, at Huckleberry, most things will look the same. The only difference that we will have is in the lunchrooms, and Karen's going to talk a little bit about what we are doing for lunch. But the other arrival, dismissal, all of our safety procedures will look the same. And I just have to share that Stephen shared how the kids will see each other for the first time, some of them. And my favorite part of the first day of school when each grade level came back is when I would get the kids out of the car and they would say, "Miss Weiler, I'm gonna meet my screen friend today." And it made me feel a little bad. I'm like, oh, this is clearly a pandemic, but it also was super exciting. And so I just want to highlight all the good things that are going to happen, obviously, when your kids transition back. And Karen, do you want to talk about lunch?
Sure. And I want to reiterate, the children are very excited. I feel like half the building is already in full swing, and that's a success because of the level of minutia that Phil was talking about, that all of the teachers and all of us have worked so hard on. All of the safety protocols are going to be fulfilled because they're so used to doing them. So the big difference is arrival and dismissal. We've shifted from a heavy arrival to drop off to more buses, which has been amazing and terrific. And lunch rotation, we can't fit all of the children in the lunchroom and keep that 6-foot safety distancing. And so we have to rotate through using classrooms, one classroom or two classrooms at a time, as well as the rest of the grade in the lunchroom itself. And that's just going to keep us safe. And we're lucky that we have enough staff now to make that work. And the other difference is really snack, because that's important in elementary school. At the younger levels, they're 6 feet apart for the most part. And in the upper levels, the teachers have already worked out that they will alternate children who are eating snack or having a working snack, and only half the class will have it at a time, or go outside whenever possible. So I think that's the silver lining. This is spring. We can utilize the outside as much as possible. And they're not tethered to the Zoom anymore. They can really explore those options outside.
Kristen, do you want me to mention too for the remote teachers, because I know it looks a little bit different in elementary. So we have hired a kindergarten teacher, a first and second grade combined teacher for both schools, and same thing for third and fourth grade. Those classes are very small. 11 is the largest number that we have, and that's in the third and fourth grade class. Those classes will also be utilized for students who are on protocol. So they'll continue to get the same curriculum. We do have combined grades, but in those classes, we have tutors that will work with the various grade levels so that everybody's meeting the standards that they need to for their grade level.
Right. Any questions from the committee? Well, I just wanted to thank you guys. I know you guys are putting in more hours than probably any other year you've been in education, and having to stay on for 3 hours tonight is very much appreciated. So thank you for all you're doing. All right, Kristen, you can, I don't know if there's anything else with the superintendent's report.
We just have a few college acceptances.
Excellent.
So always looking forward to that list. So this evening we have Bentley University, we have Trent University in Ontario, we have the University of California at Irvine, we have Gettysburg College, Champlain College, and American University. And a quick little fun fact about Gettysburg College, my grandfather graduated from there in 1935.
Wow.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yep, he was a baseball player.
Very nice.
Yep.
All right. Well, Lee, we'll move on to public participation. There is one person waiting. I don't know if they will jump on, but I will give them the opportunity. Erica M. Looks like it is trying to connect. All right. I don't think that she is connecting. Erica, it doesn't look like you're connecting. If you do have a question or comment and you want to send an email or give one of us a call, we can certainly address it offline. All right. Seeing no other public participation, let me just pull it up. We are going to move to an executive session. We will not be reconvening in public. So move to adjourn to executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining under MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21, A2. Again, we will not be returning to open session.
Second.
Rich?
Yes.
Tim?
Sorry, yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
All right. Thank you all very much. A reminder, our next meeting will be April 6th, and that should be in person at a location to be determined. Thank you.
Thank you.